Hello and welcome to Dan's Model Works, and today we're going to be taking a look at Revell's original Mini Cooper. And this of course is by Revell USA. This kit is in fact based on the Revell Germany kit, which came out in 2012. This one came out in 2013, but they are still available. I've seen them in stores, so I think it's worth taking a look at. Now this is in fact the original generation of the Mini. This is the one that came out in 1959. It was refreshed in the late 60s, I believe, and they changed a few details, smartened it up a little bit, and then it stayed largely unchanged all the way until its discontinuance. Just a piece of trivia for those of you who know a little bit about the Mini, but not a lot about the original history of it. There were, in fact, two original versions of the Mini. At the time, the Austin Motor Company and the Morris Motor Company had merged, and this was the first product that they brought out together. If you bought an Austin, it was called the Austin 7. If you bought a Morris, it was the Morris Mini Minor. So basically they referred to it as a miniature version of their earlier minor car. Really, there were very few differences between the two. If it was made in Cowley, it was a Morris, and if it was made in Longbridge, it was an Austin. And if you want more interesting details about the Mini, I recommend that you try to get a hold of this book by Simon Garfield. I don't know if it is still available. You might try looking on Amazon. You might also find it in your local library. Library? What's a library? But it's a fantastic book. It's got all kinds of little stories and talks to a lot of the people who were involved in building the original Mini, as well as the launch of the new Mini. It tends to jump around an awful lot, but I certainly found the book to be very interesting. Let's get this out of the way. As we look at the outside of the box, we can see in Revell's standard box design, you get the details on the side, and a little potted history, 128 parts, which certainly seems awfully high for such a small car. If we flip around the other side, looking at the other side of the box, we've got a nice shot of the inside of the car, the engine compartment and the back side. If it looks kind of Spartan on the inside, there wasn't a whole lot to the inside of the original Mini. The engine compartment, though, certainly looks super detailed. Alright, so let's see what we have inside here. We have the body. Don't drop it in the carpet, you'd probably lose it. The instructions, we'll go through those in a minute. We have one bag with white sprues. We have one bag containing the clear parts. A bag containing chrome parts. And we have a second sprue with chrome parts. And then we have, oh, aren't they cute? Some really tiny tires. And a decal sheet. No surprises if you've seen the current Revell instruction sheet. You've seen this one. Of course, we have the history in 3 different languages. We've got the legal content, don't eat the parts. Flip over here, and we've got some suggested colors. And then on this page, we have a parts guide. And of course, more parts over here. Getting into the assembly, we start with, oh, what a surprise, the engine. So we've got, looks like 5 steps just to put the engine together. And then installing it in the floor pan. And all the engine bay details are separately. And in case you were wondering, you can build it either as right-hand drive or left-hand drive. That certainly is something I like seeing. How many extra parts does it take? Really, not that many. And work continues on the engine bay. So you can certainly see that there's probably not a whole lot you need to add to super detail this. Revell certainly doesn't confuse you with its instructions. Only one or two parts get added per step. Certainly makes for a large manual, especially with a high parts count like this kit has. And we've got putting those little roller skate wheels on. And once again, here's a chance to decide whether you want left or right hand drive. Work on the interior continues. And as you might know, my favorite is the separate door panels. That looks so much better than trying to mold them in. And we've got finishing off the tub. Once again, you've got more options, left hand or right hand drive. Working on the hood. The underbody details. And of course we have finishing it off. Even the wipers are separate. Now they give you two separate grills. They don't tell you which one is for a minor, they don't tell you which one is for a Morris and which one is for an Austin. I'm assuming that's what the difference is between them. They're very similar, but maybe if you go online, you can find out the answer there. And then we have putting the decals on. Now I'm pretty sure you don't need to build this as a Cooper. All the Cooper was a hot rod version where the tuning was made a little bit more powerful and a few suspension tweaks. There wasn't a whole lot really physically different between the cars. And here are the decals. They give you two separate decals for the instruments. Obviously one is for right hand, one's for left hand. They give you a variety of license plates, as well as they give you a number of stickers to denote which country in Europe you're from, or you reside in, as well as a couple sets of US license plates there. I don't see any issues with registration or anything like that. Everything looks well lined up. So definitely a nice decal sheet. Certainly larger than you would expect for a car, given that there's no stripes or anything fancy like that. Now let's look at the parts. Just so I don't lose them, here are two parts that were rattling around loose in the whites parts bag. Looks like probably the front of the engine. And this, believe it or not, is the cooling fan. So they're going to go right back in the bag before I lose them. Here's a close-up of the tires. And you can see the nice tread pattern that's molded on them. Very, very nicely done. However, there is no brand name on the side of the tires, but we've come to expect that from Revell. Moving on to the chrome parts. These are the surrounds for the headlights, and we have the side mirrors, windshield wipers, as well as some of the other, these look like the door handles. And then on this sprue, as I mentioned before, they give you a choice of grills. And like I said, probably one of them is for an Austin and one is for a Morris. We have the bumpers. And then, of course, we've got the wheels. Very, very nicely molded. I'm not seeing any flash or anything like that. But once again, for a kit that's only 2 or 3 years old, this is what you would expect. The next item to look at is the Transparencies, and I'm not going to take them out of the bag, but instead of having all the Transparencies in basically a glass tent, they're all separate, which can be challenging to mount. But on the other hand, sometimes you have to apply an awful lot of force until your glue goes off when it's all one piece. The nice thing about this is you put a piece in and it'll generally stay. So there are 5 sprues of white parts, and this one here certainly looks like it has a lot of the engine parts. And this is probably your instrument binnacle from the inside, and as well as some of the suspension parts. That looks certainly like the front axle there. And here's your tie rod. We've got this little tiny sprue here, and it has, let's get a focus on. There's some nice texture on that part there, and that certainly looks like it's an air intake for the heater. And here's the exhaust, the cluster of pedals, the steering wheel, front seat, or the seat backs, I believe. And then here's the front seats. And here's the parts for putting together the basic bucket. We have the inside floor pan, and we have the side panels, the rear seat, and then this, believe it or not, are the two halves of the engine. There's your gear shift. And then we have this sprue here, which has, I believe, the roof. And let's flip it over. We can see the underside of the chassis. Lots of nice detail there. And here we have the sides of the engine bay, the subframe for the front, the hood, more suspension parts, and looks like one of the interior pieces. I'm not seeing any real flash on any of these parts. Certainly looks good to me. And finally, last but not least, we have the body. And this looks really good. And if anyone's looking at these lines and thinking, oh my god, look at those horrible seams where the molds came together. Well, on a Mini, they really did have these external seams. That was where the unibody was welded together. Basically, there was a bead running on the outside of the body to hold it all together. And I'm thinking you possibly, maybe if you wanted to, you could modify this to have a sunroof or something like that. And of course, we have where it was molded. I'm certainly liking this part. This is really, really well done. And sits level, no issues there, unlike a real Mini. So those of you who have never really been up close and personal to the original Mini, you can't go by the current Mini because it's actually a fairly large car. There's the original Mini. Here is the Volkswagen Rabbit that we looked at a few weeks ago, which for its day was a very small car. And from the 80s, the Honda CRX, which was kind of the commuter version of the Civic. And most people would consider both of these to be very small cars. And as you can see, the Mini is quite small. The Mini is capable of fitting up inside both of these other small cars. So you've got the original Mini Cooper by Revell USA. And if you have a chance to pick up the Revell Germany kit, I'm sure it would be just as good. I mean, after all, it would have come out of the same molds. Maybe there would be a little bit of difference in the decals or whatever, but I would hardly recommend either version, be it the European or the US version. So until next time, thanks for watching Dan's Model Works, and keep on modeling. Thanks.